sir.
All right. Thank you, Paul, for agreeing to be part of my project. I chose you as an audience because I think you'll be interested in this concept, just by virtue of the fact that it's an interesting concept, but also because as a fellow college student, I think that the concept of interpolation bears particular relevance for you, especially as someone who is going to graduate next semester and is going to try to start to navigate, their lives and make choices towards what they're going to do with their lives. I think this topic is particularly relevant. And I just want to say that this is supposed to be, obviously I'm presenting information to you, but I want you to be able to make comments and ask questions throughout. It's supposed to be more of a dialogue, and I'm going to ask you questions. So it'll be a dialogue that way.
All right.
Okay, so just to sort of ground this discussion, I want you to start off by thinking about the way that you encountered the idea of college when you were growing up, especially in high school, how you started to kind of think about applying to colleges or choosing colleges, and how was the idea of college or going to college presented to you? Was it presented as a choice? Was it presented as something that you had to do? Did you feel like you could have chosen to not go to college, to go down another path? And how do you think your encounter with college, how do you think that happened in high school? And by contrast, do you think some people are urged explicitly or implicitly not to go to college?
All right. So I was introduced to college. It was kind of, for a lot of the time, it was just sort of like a concept to me, just kind of as like what you do as you grow up. But I didn't really acknowledge like the alternatives really like that early on at all. Like, I kind of just felt like that's what everyone does. But as I developed more, like as I just grew up more, like I kind of understood like everyone kind of does like different. And I definitely understand that even more now, like 4 years into college. So I guess I was pretty much like urged into like this process, kind of as everyone is. Like my first exposure to college was probably just like being on a campus like during summer camp as a kid or something. So I was like, okay, like that's cool. But it didn't really feel like, it always felt like a grown-up thing until I finally like started college. And it's just sort of like you're a little older and everything, but it's just sort of like the same process, same like lessons.
Yeah, so you mentioned something about how when you were in high school, when you were first exposed to the idea of college, it didn't really feel like much of a choice, and only later did you realize, oh, there are other avenues that people can go down, there's other things you can do with your life besides college.
And yeah, I mean also just like, like the cost of college and everything, like the economic, financial factors that go into it, and like how it's actually really difficult for people to go to college. Like that didn't really hit me until it was me who had to worry about like how expensive one school would be, or like how much how it would affect my family.
Yeah, on that note, I want to ask you, do you think that there's other people, maybe people who you went to high school with, or people who maybe didn't even go to high school, who are urged not to go to college, who are kind of funneled towards the other path in a similar way that you were funneled towards the path of college? Are other people funneled away from college?
Well, people made a lot more choices of their own, I guess. Like from what I saw, like they kind of, they did different things. Like, they kind of stayed where they lived, or they just like worked exclusively and stuff. And, a lot of those people kind of just forged their own path, like right off the bat. Like a lot of people from high school where I went, like ended up going to college, but like, all their paths are like drastically like different still. And a lot of people go here too from high school, and it's kind of like, I think we still have like very different experiences through that.
Okay, great. So that's just kind of like something to consider to sort of ground the discussion as we move forward. Next, I just want to talk about Louis Altuzair a little bit. This is the main thinker associated with the concept of interpolation, which is what we're talking about. He was a Marxist, and his main contribution was analyzing how dominant social systems, especially capitalism, enforce their control and reproduce themselves. And one of his main ideas was that people were unconsciously molded by ideology in every facet of life. So, you know, you go to the movies, you're molded by ideology. You know, you go out with your friends, in invisible and invisible ways, you're being molded by ideology. Okay, and so these are some important definitions to the idea of interpolation. First, we have ideology, and Altuzair defines this as the imaginary relationships, the imaginary relationship of individuals to their real conditions of existence. And so, just to explain this a little bit further, Altuzair is positing that reality is different from what people understand it to be and their relationship to it. And so ideology is the way in which reality is obscured or distorted in the understanding of individuals. So next we have repressive state apparatus, or RSA is what it's shortened to. And these are institutions that reproduce the conditions of production that operate primarily through mental and physical coercion and violence. And the examples include the army, the police, and the prison system. And when I say the conditions of production, this just means the predominant social relations within a society. So this could be like unequal power distributions, you know, the rich and the poor, and just the way the kind of social relations manifest. And so then we have ideological state apparatus, shortened to ISA, and this, by contrast, are institutions that operate primarily by means of ideology. And so for this, you can think about schools, you can think about social clubs, you can think about things like the media, which aren't repressive, like the police or the army, which use physical force. These, by contrast, use ideology. Okay, and so this is the description of interpolation, the process itself. And so this can be understood as the process by which a social system reproduces its basic or social relations and ensures its continued existence across generations. So individuals encounter the values and assumptions of a social system and internalize them through ideology, thinking that they have come to these conclusions on their own, thus they become successfully interpolated into the system. So yeah, this is just kind of describing the way that a lot of the invisible assumptions and premises of a social system are kind of reproduced and for future generations, right, or for incoming generations. These are things that don't exist naturally, obviously. They rather need to be instilled in people, or people need to be indoctrinated into them. And so interpolation is just describing the process by which that happens. And so one of Altuzair's points is that interpolation begins even before we are born. And so this you can understand in the way that when parents are expecting a child, they do a lot of things to prepare for the child, right? They pick out a name, they design a nursery, they make all of these plans in their life, they tell their family and friends. And so you can observe the way in which before someone even comes into the world, they are being prepared to be kind of entered into this system over which they have no control, right? They're being named, they're having everything kind of set up for them. They don't really have any choice in the matter. Not that a baby should have choice, but or can make a choice, but it's just to demonstrate the way that interpolation begins, before you're even born, before you're even a person. And so more on the difference between ISAs and RSAs. So obviously ISAs are more subtle than RSAs. It's easier to coax someone into believing something in a classroom than it is, under the boot of like a police officer or something. And so ISAs are the predominant means by which interpolation happens, right? And it is precisely because they use ideology and people encounter the ideas, internalize them, and think that they are correct or that they are their own ideas. Whereas, if it's a repressive state apparatus, they might see the power dynamics, they might see the coercion involved. You have any questions so far?
Yeah, honestly, I just wanted to think, how do we personally start undergoing the realization that we're kind of coerced into these beliefs? Is there really a way to pinpoint when this happens, or do you think it's different for every individual?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think Altuzair would argue that for a lot of people, there never really becomes comes a time where they do question the process of interpolation or even identify it. And that's why it is such a powerful system, because it's functional a lot of the time. It works, People are successfully interpolated into the system and they don't question it. I think, and we're going to get into this a little later on, that Altuzair would also say that no system is complete. No system of this kind is perfect or total, and so because there are imperfections, or there are spaces in which the interpolation doesn't fully work, that's always going to create people who observe this process and who can challenge it. But yeah, it's a good question, and I think even by talking about it, by identifying it, that is a way in which you challenge the system and resist it. Okay, so this is one of the examples that I think illustrates some of the ideas of interpolation in the process. It's from the Bee movie. I don't know if you've seen it. You don't have to have seen it. But this particular scene illustrates kind of the illusion of choice that exists within systems like this. And so I'm just going to go ahead and play it.
The purple grid is about 80% air. That means it can breathe, so you're not too hot and not too cold.
I can't believe we're starting work today.
Today's the day.
Come on, all the good jobs will be gone.
Yeah, right. Pollen counting, stuff feed, pouring, stir, front desk, hair removal.
Is it still available?
Hang on. 2 left and one of them's yours. Congratulations, son. Step to the side, please.
Yeah. What'd you get? Picking the crud up?
Whoa.
That's stellar. Wow.
Couple of newbies?
Yes, sir. First day. We are ready.
Well, step up and make your choice.
You want to go first?
No, you go.
Oh, my. What's available?
Restroom attendant's always open, and not for the reason you think.
Any chance of getting onto the Krellman, sir?
Sure, you're on. Oh, I'm sorry, the Krellman just closed out. Oh, Wax Monkey's always open. And the Krellman just opened up again.
Well, what happened?
Well, whenever a bee dies, that's an opening. See that? He's dead, dead, another dead one, deady, deadified, 2 more dead, dead from the neck up, dead from the neck down. But that's life.
Oh, well, this is so hard. Heating, cooling, stumpy, pour, stir, humming, inspector number 7, wind coordinator, strike supervisor, and 10 floor calls from lightning. But Barry, what do you think I should... Barry!
Okay, so I chose that example because I think the kind of the image of the big monitor with all of the jobs that are constantly in flux and they're becoming available or unavailable. I think that is really illustrative of the way in which there is a pre-approved set of choices presented to people within a system, and so they may feel like they're choosing because they can look at the board and say, oh, I want to go there, I want to do this job, but really they don't question how this list of options came to be in the first place. And I think you can see Barry at the end, he kind of realizes that, and that's why he refuses to opt in. He refuses to choose because he sees how, again, this is a pre-approved set of jobs that the hive, or like the queen bee, chooses to kind of perpetuate the system of the hive itself and the structure and relations of the hive. And there isn't really any choice involved because the constraints imposed from above. You can only have these certain jobs available, and so I think that's a good example of the illusion of choice that is a part of interpolation. And so, I think we can bring this idea kind of back to what we talked about earlier with college, where for a lot of people, they feel like they have a choice in terms of where they go to college, what they major in, if they go to college. But I would argue that it's in a lot of ways it's like what we're seeing here, which is you have this list, this set of options presented to you, and you do have to choose from within that, even if you feel like the choice is yours. It's still something that is being forced upon you. So do you think this example kind of makes sense in that way, Paul?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this scene was in there.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
Let's see. Okay, and just another example. This is a scene from the movie The Graduate.
Ben, what are you doing?
Well, I would say that I'm just drifting here in the pool.
Why?
Well, it's very comfortable just to drift here.
Have you thought about graduate school?
No?
Would you mind telling me then what those 4 years of college were for? What was the point of all that hard work?
You got me.
Now listen, Ben. Look, I think it's a very good thing that a young man, after he's done some very good work, should have a chance to relax and enjoy himself and lie around and drink beer and so on. But after a few weeks, I believe that person would want to take some stock in himself and his situation and start to think about getting off his ass.
The Robinsons are here.
Hi, Ben. What are you doing with yourself these days?
Oh, not too much. Taking it easy.
That's what I'd do if I could. Nothing wrong with that. Hey, Ben, Elaine's coming down from Berkeley soon. I want you to call her up this
Stop
time.
it there. So this example, it's kind of similar to the last one in that we see kind of a disruption in the process of interpolation, right? Ben here has graduated from college, and in the process of doing so, he is kind of seeing that, or he feels listless, and he feels that he can't see the point of having gone to college in the first place, right? It was something that his parents kind of pushed him into. He never really thought about it very much, and now that he's gone through it and he's trying to, figure out the next step in his life, he has kind of seen the quality of the coercion and the lack of choice, and he is listless as a result. And I think that this scene is a really good example of kind of an ISA, an ideological state apparatus, in the form of Ben's parents and their friends, right? You can see the pressure being applied to Ben by them to sort of conform or to kind of continue the process of interpolation, to get a job, to go to graduate school, to call their daughter. All of these kind of these forces converging to make the individual successfully interpolate into the system, right? And Ben is resisting that. He's resisting it by not doing much of anything. But I think the example of Ben from The Graduate is a good example of an individual seeing the process of interpolation, the process becoming visible, and as a result, all interest in being interpolated is lost. And so, this brings us to other types of interpolation. These include the naturalization of certain identities, naturalization of whiteness, heteronormativity, and so basically any taken for granted or unconscious cultural assumptions. And this, I just wanted to kind of show the way that interpolation is present in things like the continuation of white supremacy, racism, how in addition to being interpolated into the capitalist system, the assumptions of white supremacy are also kind of invisible and are constantly being enforced. And similar to the way that we can name instances of kind of invisible racism or invisible capitalist assumptions, this is a way to resist it. This is a way to resist interpolation. This will bring us to ways to challenge interpolation. And so, like I kind of mentioned before, Altuzair says that ideology or the system is always incomplete, imperfect, that gaps in the system create openings for challenges to that system. And by exposing the invisible process of interpolation to conscious scrutiny, which is kind of like what we're doing now, we can resist its assumptions and open the door to other possibilities. We can think critically about interpolation and ideology, and with enough people, create sub-ideologies that challenge the dominant one. And so it really does start with identifying what for so long and for so many people still is invisible, because that's a prerequisite in being able to resist it. And we saw, in the example of the graduate, he has kind of identified that, and he is resisting. It's sort of a passive resistance, but resistance nonetheless of not opting into the system, right? Of seeking other possibilities outside of it. So yeah, what do you think about this? Do you understand kind of what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is like a lot of universal ideologies, like which are, pushing people down certain paths and stuff like that, and like, a lot of people end up having these really unrealized like careers and shit because, they just kind of, get caught in the current, and that's their like routine for life and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Do you think, if more people were kind of exposed to this idea, maybe even, in high school or like when they're in the process of applying to college, you think more people might choose something else, might kind of see that, or might be persuaded that college is kind of being forced on them and they might offer something else? Or do you think, I don't know, most people would probably still go to college?
Well, we went to a college prep high school, so the idea always was that we're preparing for college with every assignment and like every project we work on, and honestly it over-prepared us because it had us so high strung with work and like our daily routine and everything that college, it's not even really that much more difficult, but we're just taught to think like, it's just gonna get harder and harder from here. And that's true, like in a sense, but you don't need to deal with everything the way that people tell you to and stuff like that, or the way that the system thinks you should, because if not college, you want to like join the military, like no, I never would.
Right.
But people aren't really exposed to like different options, like
right.
Especially like kids with less opportunities, like who probably can't afford college as easily, like they're kind of like, their options are more limited, in the grand scheme of things, like according to, like societal norms and whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's either education, like the military, or just like get a 9 to 5, like hit the ground running.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And do you think maybe like part of the way in which we can broaden or expand the options available to people is by kind of doing what we're doing now and showing how what seem like options aren't really, or that we're presented with a much narrower kind of range of options than what it might appear to be, or even to question the assumptions of like what is the utility of college anyway? Why can't what is being advertised as a college experience, or why is that good, or why can't that be realized in other ways?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think doing stuff like that will result in more options for people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like I think if you kind of took away like if you stopped idealizing like certain things, like like a family saying you should be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, like in a broader sense, then I think like if people really realize like the stuff that they wanted to do without like like seeing so many obstacles to the process and stuff, like I think they would probably find things that fulfill them more if they forge their own paths and pursue like what they love to do without like money or that type of social status of some kind like limiting that.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps it up. Do you have any more questions or comments you want to make? I don't have any more slides. So.
No. I think this is really enriching.
Yeah, you're interested in the concept?
Mm-hmm.
Good, man. Yeah, I thought you would be. It's kind of exciting the way that something so simple, you can kind of extrapolate it and identify it in a lot of different ways once you learn a little bit about it, you know? All right, well, thanks a lot, Paul.
Thank you so much, dude.